In a rapidly expanding omniverse of sci-fi content, two Terrans try to make sense of it all. From the latest to the greatest to the most thought-provoking science fiction content on the screen, we bring you Crowded Space!
I'm as ready as I will ever be.
All right,
Voice
here we go.
warmed up.
We're going in. Welcome to the Crowded Space Podcast episode, Season 2, Episode 42.
The real episode 42.
The real 42. Blast from the Past, Logan's Run, 1976, and this is a cult sci-fi classic. I'm your host, Eric.
And I'm your other host over the age of 30, Jared.
Uh-oh. Yeah. I'd have been long dead, dude.
Yep,
This movie.
means they're coming for us.
Uh-oh. Let's run.
Yeah, exactly. So, should I do a recap first? You want to talk about how you know this movie or any memories of it?
I remember watching it in the military when we were out in the ocean. We watched this one. It was a popular one. This one and the Jane Fonda one. What's that one called again?
Barbarella.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those two were popular.
I have a feeling that they were being watched for reasons other than the science fiction elements introduced and concepts introduced in them.
It's funny that this is a PG, but yet there was plenty of boobies going around.
Yeah, at least one very clear full frontal. Well, not full. Yeah, almost full frontal.
Yeah, almost full frontal. I was surprised.
Scene.
I was like, wait a minute. This is PG? Okay.
Well, there was no PG-13 back then.
Right. That makes, yeah.
And I agree that it's not R-rated.
No. Well, I guess it falls into those murky waters.
Yeah, different days for sure.
Well, what about you? Do you remember seeing this thing?
Yeah, I remember going. It was for reasons we just kind of touched on. I remember going out of my way to rent it. I think I was like 17 or something like that. I'd read about it in a sci-fi magazine, and I was like, okay, this is classic sci-fi. Oh, and there's boobies. You know, I'm all in. So yeah, so it'll be interesting to talk about in terms of diversity and female representation.
Oh boy, that's going to be an interesting subject to dive into anyway.
Yeah, but in cases where there is a scrolling marquee, I figured that's going to be one of our best ways to introduce Logan's Run. So
let's go in.
Somewhere in the 23rd century, the survivors of war, overpopulation, and pollution are living in a great domed city, sealed away from the forgotten world outside. Here, in an ecologically balanced world, mankind lives only for pleasure, freed by the servo mechanisms which provide everything. There's just one catch. Life must end at 30 unless reborn into the fiery ritual of carousel.
Carousel.
So, yeah, carousel was actually a novel idea introduced in the movie that wasn't in the book. But at any rate, so that gives you a pretty good, it sets the tone of the world that we're in.
Well done.
Post-apocalyptic. Well done. I'm just reading there.
I know, but I'm just saying, you still have the voice for it.
And what's really going on in this movie is we're following one of the Sandmen whose job it is to hunt down and kill the runners who decide they want to live older than 30 and want to look for life outside of the city. And so there's a pretty potent scene in which the main character, Logan 5, if I recall correctly.
You're right. Logan 5.
Is kind of sat down by the main computer after he finds this Ankh amongst one of the runners he gunned down. And the computer essentially tasks him to find sanctuary where the runners are supposedly going off to, and accelerates the little flashing crystal on his hand so that it's plausible that this is now a Sandman turn runner. And essentially using a potential runner connection that he found through what's their version of online dating?
Teleport portal?
Yeah.
I don't know.
The booty call 3000, I think is what it was.
Okay. I guess it's happening.
Yeah, and so he uses her connections with the the other runners to essentially have a chance at getting outside and finding sanctuary. And after that, it's him coming to the realization that maybe this utopian world that he's been protecting isn't the utopia that we think that it is. And so,
especially when he sees grass and all that.
Right. Yeah. So ultimately they do make it outside and experience what it's like to be old by meeting this older gentleman that's kind of lost some of his marbles and quoting Cats from the show Cats. And spoiler alert.
Oh boy.
And then when he comes back with proof to his fellow citizens that you can live, there is life after 30.
You don't have to die. Well, no one has to die at 30. You can live.
And that essentially renewal, this promise of rebirth, if you're well behaved, is found out to be a lie. And the computer kind of short circuits and malfunctions, and the whole city like collapses because it can't comprehend that there actually is no sanctuary. And
right.
Yeah.
The biggest point was, like you said, when he ran outside with was it Jessica 6 to find the sanctuary, and then he found the old man, and it was like the rundown city. They were in Washington, I think, or something like that.
Oh yeah, it was Washington D.C. is where they stumbled
all
upon
down and all that, and they're like traveling through the forest, and then they get past a robot in the ice cave. They were like freezing. So
yeah,
that's the thing.
That's a point I wasn't sure to talk about or not. But yeah, that essentially a sanctuary was
them being
a
frozen
lie as well, because as soon as anyone got out of the city, they went into like the freezer storage section of the city, where the malfunctioning robot box was just freezing them and storing them from later, because and I love this quote. This is one of the few things that I do remember about Logan Run watching it as a kid, was the
fish, plankton, sea greens.
And so that wasn't coming anymore. So he was like, well, I'll freeze this for food in case the city runs out. So kind of a grisly scene, actually.
Yeah, that was.
And yeah, a really good excuse to get their clothes off as well. Like, and yeah, well, I don't want to get too...
Let's take our clothes off. Okay.
I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves in influence, but we might need to come back to that scene, let's say.
So what do you think of with the diversity in sci-fi?
We're starting right off with diversity.
Let's dive into that, and maybe we'll do some balancing here and there. I figured we'd knock this one out first.
So in terms of direct representation of diversity on the screen, not so much. So the actor that played Box was African-American Roscoe Lee Brown. So, there is that, at least, that there was a black actor in the cast and crew, even if you did not get to see his skin. Or
when they pulled the mask off of Vader, you didn't see James Earl Jones' face there.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely whitewashing. This is chrome washing, I guess. No. And unfortunately, it was some really bad makeup. I thought when they did the close-up of Box, it was like, oh yeah, that's the dude with like tinfoil stuck to his face. Wasn't really like let's keep the camera panned
let's try
out.
This again.
Yeah, let's keep the camera panned out on the retake, guys.
But obviously, but like I said, it's like 48 years earlier, so it wasn't a big to do back then compared to what it is today. At least it's more the portfolio is a lot larger for different racial ethnics.
What's a little sticky is how they represent females. So
sticky.
Because essentially the main female character, Jessica, here is wearing like a see-through tunic with no bra on underneath for the majority of this movie, right? So there's some obvious, just Hollywood eye candy going on here, and she's being, objectified. There's no way around that. Now you can say, hey, look, this is the world that they're in. This is a, utopian hedonistic society where you're living for pleasure and most people are spending half their day in orgies and doing online dating and all
That
this
weird
stuff,
club
right?
thing they were
That
doing.
was a very weird club scene for sure. That needs to be talked about. I'm not sure if now's the time, but it needs to be talked about.
We'll get there.
Yeah. So it's like, oh, of course, that's how she would dress in that society because it is a very sexual society, right? But at the same time, if that's true, then Logan's very conservative. They're not giving both males and females the same treatment here in terms of skin and sexualization.
He had a jumpsuit
so yeah, the argument of that it would make sense for that character to look like that in the world. Well, Logan's character would probably look a little bit more sexualized too. What do you think of her? How did she contribute, to the plot, and how do you think she was as a character?
She was like, first, like you said, eye candy, and then it was more like the damsel in distress type of scenario, like kind of like the time machine with.
Yeah, when they get into the woods and she just totally, they're outside for the first time and they've been walking and they've never been outside of their mini mall.
Right. Mini mall. Is there a Starbucks in there?
And she was like,
It's dark, cold, and I'm tired.
just whiny and protect me. And so she did play the damsel in distress. She kind of was the key to unlocking outside the city and his connection. The character did come across
she knew the
pretty
rebels or whatever.
But honestly, all the characters came across as pretty weak, so I can't say that the female character was exceptionally weak.
Did you see Farrah Fawcett was in there too?
Yeah.
She was. She played the assistant to the doctor.
Right. Yeah.
I kind of felt like it was a little bit like Total Recall. Remember when Arnold goes in there and to get Total Recall with the doctor and that whole scene? I felt like it had a little strong connect, with her being the damsel and then his like weird companion / partner, the other guy, Francis 7.
Yeah, Francis 7.
Yeah, and him following it, and he didn't have the same reaction being outside as the rest.
Yeah,
of
that
them.
is a pretty strong side plot. I totally left out is that his partner as a Sandman,
right,
was following him.
He wasn't freaking out like the rest of them.
It was a pretty weak part of the plot that his buddy
we're
who
outside
saw
right now.
the same truths that he did was like, no, we must go back, and was just. Again, he was just there to push the plot along and have a little bit of tension without it, really being thought out. So. But we'll address that a little bit later, I suppose. Want to talk about special effects and music?
Dive into musicality and movie magic. So any
standouts for you?
Definitely the club scene was a little psychedelic for the 70s for sure.
Yeah, again, it just seemed like an excuse to, there was a real nightclub. It just seemed like an excuse to show some skin. It's really hard to explain. There was like a lot of half-naked bodies.
I didn't even know.
And strobe lights and the flashing colors and almost like slow-mo strobe effects. And they're like... it's a chase scene, and they're trying to get lost in the orgy room.
I feel like
something.
I feel like it's almost you could have the $6 Million Man like in the background when they're trying to run through there.
Well, it's funny that you bring that up because my notes, it was like early on in the movie when they're just setting the scene. And it's unfortunately really is. It is filmed in a mini mall. A lot of these scenes, or in a mall, so it's like. Yeah, that didn't hold up, but hearing just the electronic beep music was like, it really had no warmth, no depth to it. Just
the carousel scene was kind of cool though, with the way they were levitating,
Yeah, and that the visual effects for that.
I think that's where
certainly won them awards.
Yeah.
They
so
introduced, if I recall correctly, they introduced like a whole new way of doing holograms to film that scene, or at least a twist on the tried and true holographic projection. So that's pretty cool. But getting back to the music, so the first half of the movie, it really fell flat for me. I'd seen it semi recently, and it still didn't bring back any memories.
Right.
But what I did notice on this rewatch is that when they're inside the Dome City, it's electronic music, and when they're outside in the real world, it's all orchestral music.
Right.
And so it was kind of clever. They did that divide
so
of
they can
the hard techno AI controlled world versus the the orchestral music in the second half was actually decent.
Yeah.
And it wasn't there wasn't a lot of all of their time outside, other than the fight scene with Francis, was rather harmonious. So there wasn't a lot of that orchestral with the blaring horn that I keep bringing up. It was like, oh man, this doesn't hold up. Going back to special effects though, and I guess some of the scenes, right? It was a roller coaster. For me, it was a roller coaster. Some of the scenes were just like, wow, this is awesome. Like the carousel.
Yes.
It didn't quite hold up because you could kind of, see it was a holographic, but it was still cool.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's other places where, like I said, like, oh, that's obviously a shopping mall. That's not very good. Or when they were in the freezer place, like the robot was trash for the most part. The whole set was just
and
like,
then they're like getting undressed and it's cold. Like, it's just. We're
talking. Okay, we'll find it. We're not going to talk about it again, so I'll talk about it now.
Okay.
I feel in terms of influence, I feel like that scene has influenced, that has like introduced the trope of like,
Let's take our clothes off first before they freeze on us.
clothes are wet. We need to take them off and get warm, right? Like as an excuse to show some skin and move some things along with the characters. It's certainly like in anime, it is a huge trope. It's a huge trope. Like, oh, we got wet. You're gonna catch a cold. If you got wet clothes on, I'll start a fire.
You're gonna catch a
I'll start a fire. Yeah. But then as they're, as they were escaping, and there were like the whole huge aquarium scene and the industrial, it's all leaking water everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm like, that looks awesome. That is convincing. I feel like I am in the underbelly of an automated city.
Yeah, when Francis was chasing
here.
them.
Yeah.
That was cool.
I thought that worked really well. And
that's
when
it picked up a little bit.
Like the San Fernando freaking waste treatment plant.
Yeah.
Where they shot that. It immersed me. It didn't take me out of it.
That's
like
when
the
they
mall.
also meet up with the resistance or whatever. Right?
Yeah, right after. Yeah, when they use the Ankh to get out of essentially the inner city walls or whatever. That's
that was
a lot of those scenes
cool.
really worked for me. And same with DC. Because essentially they took like photographs of DC and painted all of like the overgrowth and vines and shrubbery
and
over
I like
it.
Where the old guy's place, his
he's
crib.
in a chamber,
crib
Senate chamber essentially with all of his cats.
Yeah, it was cool.
Shuffling around eating walnuts or whatever. So
or cats. One doesn't know.
Yeah, the cats have 3 names.
Anyway.
That was just, and actually that was something that was a big memory for me because it was just like, what? Cats have 3 names?
Got 3 different names. See, they got the ordinary name, and then they got their fancy name. And that makes 2 names, doesn't it? Well, now it's got a 3rd name. Can either of you two guess what that 3rd name is?
Their normal name, their fancy name, and then their secret name, and it boggled me to the point so much when I watched it when I was 17. I used the early, Alta Vista pre-Google search engine.
My God,
to be like, what
Alta
is this?
Wow.
To figure out that it's a quote from the Cats Broadway show. Why he knew, anyways.
Alta Vista. I'm still laughing about that one.
And then what I was really impressed with, there's also the scene where they're fighting with the big tanks of water, and they smash like what looks like a 500-gallon tank in the wall, and the actors are being swept away by a torrent of water down a hole. Like that was the special effects. That was
really good.
That was pretty amazing. And there was one part where it's like, maybe that was a stunt double, but they were definitely
and
in danger. Shooting some of the stuff.
With them as the Sandmen too, when they were chasing and had the weapons. I thought they were, they didn't go all out with like, Star Wars George Lucas style, but at least they were believable, right? In that era, kind of with the guns, when they were shooting their guns, it made like an explosion.
Yeah, I like that it was just you saw the muzzle flare and then the explosion near the person instead of trying to do a laser bolt.
Yeah, and I kind of like that because
they were way over budget as it was for this movie, like 3 times over budget.
It grossed over $25 million.
Yeah, so they got their money back. No, that's 25 like internationally, wasn't it? Yeah, because local
North
box
America.
office.
Grossing over in North America.
Okay. Yeah, it didn't do great at the beginning. But it is interesting to think about because I think it's time to get into influence. So again, to put ourselves in the seat of your moviegoer back when this came out, this is coming out on the tails of Space Odyssey 2001, coming out not that long after Planet of the Apes. Right? So, those are the sort of competition or what's fresh in people's minds as they're watching it, and from what I've read, it was mostly a hit with the youth, and that makes sense, right?
Yeah, because
you get to see some titties. There is some
trust
action.
Anybody over 30?
Yeah, and this whole it's kind of youth worship is what the first half of this movie is anyway. So something that we kind of a problem with today. And just in terms of some of the themes, I thought, or some of the things that this movie predicted, whether they were the first or not, this whole idea of like an AI controlling a city and the people, AI overseer, I thought was a bit ahead of its time, even though Space Odyssey had HAL. So it wasn't that big of a leap from other stuff that was out there. One of the scenes where he's looking to get laid, and so he's cruising the whatever teleporter,
the interweb, teleporter gadget.
So just
he brings a guy in. Oh, wrong channel or something like that.
Yeah, and the guy gives him like, I don't know, luck or whatnot before he gets to Jessica. Actually, speaking of Total Recall and scenes that were similar, I thought this, movie was a little bit ahead of its time in that when he teleported in Jessica to have a liaison, and she was like, "Oh, I did it because I'm sad because one of my friends, ran or something, or went to Carousel or whatever it was." And she's like, "It was a mistake. I don't really feel like it." And he's pressuring her, right. And it's like, oh, or, do you like girls then or something? So just like in Total Recall, when he's in the scene that you're talking about, and
yes,
she was asking the preference, and when he says that he's straight, she's surprised or whatever.
Right.
But, and then, when Logan asked Jessica, making it that in the future, everyone's sexually liberated. It's not a big deal what your preference is.
Yeah.
It was essentially that's the same kind of message and influence I think that the both of these movies had.
Right.
Like you said before, or like we were talking about a little bit previously too, in terms of influence, this did spawn a TV series. It only lasted like one season, and essentially it was revisiting their adventures outside of the city. So it was we bump into the strangers in the wasteland sort of thing. So I think this is a big stretch, and feel free to jump in if big stretch, but it's like this could almost be in the Fallout universe, right? You've got these people locked into essentially a vault.
I see it.
And they go out to explore the world that they think is unlivable.
Right,
and they have no idea. Like they're used to their being babied in their cradle or whatever. But the big difference is that the city is a dome and outside instead of underground, but pretty much the same because it's post-apocalyptic. War wiped out the world. Though
they don't have mutants though.
That we've seen.
That's true.
We've seen very little of the outside world. Though I guess we do know that mutants have taken over DC in the Fallout universe, though. And then I guess there is also a book sequel as well, because this movie is based on a book. From what I've gathered, that's diverged a fair amount. There's a sequel in case anyone's interested. I'm not sure that I am. But
no.
there was some very interesting themes, I think, brought up in this movie, right? Like I said, this idea of youth worship, because if you're over than 30, you're no longer useful to society. So we're gonna, kill you and recycle you and start over. The idea of essentially government-sponsored euthanasia, right? That which our government does, for better or worse. At least we don't have like mobile euthanasia vans like some countries, kind of. But, and then talking about just in general, the dangers of hedonism and having the government raise your kids for you, because that's what's going on here, right? Like Logan is being weird in one of the very opening scenes because he wants to see what his baby looks like.
That's right.
And his partner's that's weird, man. Like, what does that have to do with you? Like, you're just...
Yeah, there's some really good points there that with the aging and... The AI is definitely one of those things, and the euthanasia, above 30, keeping populations down in the city and stuff like that. So
yeah, and that was, I think, one of the, in terms of philosophy or whatever, one of the things, like especially in the 70s, that was emerging was it's like, hey, if you want this utopian society, it takes sacrifice. There's always going to be some freedom lost or something that you have to give up to have this utopia as we imagine it today. So it's
That's
like, oh
true.
yeah, you can have your hedonistic lifestyle, but you only get 30 years of it. And so again, while this introduces, like it puts them out there one way or another, I really don't think that Logan's Run does much with them to develop these ideas, right?
No.
It just kind of puts them out there, and then really most of what's going on the screen is just for action and for fun. I did find one kind of good quote of a reviewer that it's worth. Is this Ian Nathan, who the fuck he is, from Empire magazine, but it can't escape its 70s origins. That's true, right? In terms of the styling, and the way that the females are treated, in terms of the
nightclub,
everything from the
Psychedelic
architecture to the limitations of the tech is just the mindset in general is just locked there in the 70s. So who would you recommend this? Who would you recommend this to? What did you enjoy it? What do you think about it?
I thought it wasn't too bad. I mean, it's one of those movies that I've seen before a long time ago, and it held my attention. Well, not only because of certain things, but also the way that they portrayed the whole dystopia, and they're running and they're trying to survive, and then people are chasing them and all that stuff. So I definitely enjoyed that whole, the sci-fi feel of it.
Yeah, there was enough different locations. There was
enough
of sci-fi kind of stuff there to be like, what's that? What were they thinking? Oh, what's this computer doing? How is that being scanned?
But I mean, to recommend it, I would recommend it to somebody that wants to see if they like the dystopian style of sci-fi, like Fallout or whatever, or even the other movies we mentioned previously in there. Then I think this is the kind of movie that might hold your interest, not only because of the 70s.
If you're a horny 17-year-old without access to internet porn, I totally recommend this movie. If you're looking for some heady sci-fi that develops some interesting concepts, I would not recommend this movie.
No, it's not going to change your life.
For a campy 70s sci-fi experience with the action and a plot that moves fast enough to keep your interest, I could recommend it on
it
on
could
that
almost
level.
be a party theme too if you wanted it. You wanted to have an interesting party. It's like
if you guys are finding yourself 30 or over and feeling like your world would be better off without you, well, that's nonsense, because aging is a beautiful thing. And remember that it's not the destination,
it's the journey. Stay away from the carousel.
yeah. Go Get him, Sandman.
Soundstripe.
Above and beyond, there's one name that's left over, and this is the name you never will guess. It's a name no human research can discover, but the cat itself knows and never will confess. Will you, Henry?